Creative Synthesis on ST302, Theory and Constructs in Social Development. Human had come a long way from hunting our food to growing it and then just by ordering it over the phone. Life has gotten easier and better most of humanity as it advances through time, and this process is called development. But is it true that we had gotten better through time? Has this concept of development really means progress for everyone? As time progresses, theories and constructs in development changes from economic-oriented development to a multidimensional approach. Mainstream development perspectives measure the economic aspect of a society rooted on modernization theories from classical to neoliberal perspectives. Going back to Rostow's A Non-Communist Manifesto, presented development into stages of growth from traditional society, preconditions to take off, drive to maturity, to age of high mass consumption. Rostow's stages of growth is one of the most influential development theories of the 20th century. However, there is a limitation on the application of this model. In connection to this, market-led development, classical economics, traced back from the British Enlightenment, rationalized selfish individualism and private property accumulation and principles based on the freedom of the individual and the right to private property. The wealth of nation is not based on the accumulation of gold and silver, but on the value of goods and services it produces, what we now call gross domestic product, or later on, classical economics was developed and turned into neoclassical economics. Neoclassical economics believes that the consumer is ultimately the driver of market forces. By market forces, they mean the forces supply and demand. It focuses on how the perception of usefulness of products influences supply and demand. There are arguments that the market wasn't just an absence of interference, but it could produce a philosophy or a way of thinking all of its own. That meant looking at the world and its transaction in daily life through the eyes of the market. Neoliberalism. Harvey defines neoliberalism as a theory of political economic practices that proposes that human well-being can best be advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms and skills within an institutional framework that characterized by strong private property rights, free markets, and free trade. This gives rise to terms like liberalization of inward foreign direct investment, privatization of state enterprises, the regulation or abolition of regulations that impede market entry or restrict competition, and legal security for property rights. Neoliberalism, however, serves a capitalist systems in which a minority owns and controls the means of production, determines the development, relations with nature, and the way people are created as kinds of human beings. Capitalism is opposed by Marxists, which propose the Marxist theory, a political theory that analyzes how social classes, money, and most importantly the means of production affect society. Marxism believed that the working class or proletariats were being exploited and oppressed by the bourgeois or the ruling class who generally owned the means of production. Marxists advocate a proletariat class uprising against the bourgeois to make means of production work for society as a whole rather than for the ruling or wealthy minority. Dependency theory believes that international system is hindering growth of underdeveloped nations. Theorists argue that there are various kinds of nations. These are the core of the core nations, periphery of the core nations, the core of the periphery nations, and the last are the periphery of the periphery nations. According to dependency theory, the international system is one where all countries serve the economic interests of the core countries. These are maintained because there is a world-class distinction where majority of the wealth is controlled by a minority of political and economic elite. The next one is the postmodernism, late 20th century movement characterized by broad skepticism, subjectivism, or relativism, a general suspicion of reason, and an accurate sensitivity to the role of ideology in asserting and maintaining political and economic power. It is a complete denial of truth in defense of the world. To postmodernists, you can't prove anything and all evidence is gotten through repeating the words of others. It is a series of assumptions but not really a method of thought. Now we move on to the other perspective of development, from economic-oriented to the other dimension of viewing development. The concept of sexuality as development issue. Sexuality lies at the core of human life, of what makes us fully human. It is the key to our capacity to contribute positively and fully to the societies we will live in. But why is sexuality a development concern? Development needs to recognize the importance of sexuality and move beyond the current limited and negative approaches to embrace the significance of sexuality for development in more positive and constructive ways. The concept of feminism, on the other hand, recognizes the disadvantaged position of women in society. Feminist theories examine specifically the social constructs around women, their position in society, and the impact of development processes on women. Instead of looking at the income and economic aspect of development, human development looks into the process of enlarging people's freedom and opportunities and improving their well-being. Human development is about real freedom. Ordinary people have to decide who to be, what to do, and how to live. Participatory development is an important approach for people-oriented development that emphasizes raising the quality of participation in local societies as a step towards the realization of self-reliant, sustainable development and social justice. Other dimensions of development is the human rights perspective. A human rights-based approach also seeks to reinforce the capacities of duty bearers, usually governments, to respect, protect, and guarantee these rights. The value of human rights-based approach lies particularly in the transformative potential of human rights to alleviate injustice, inequality, and poverty. While contemporary development benefits unevenly, it widens the gap between the rich and the poor and aggravated the degradation of environment and existing social structures. Since development was geared towards market-oriented reforms, natural resources such as forest, water, minerals, among others, were exploited and compromised. Sustainable development is the idea that human societies must live and meet their needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable development recognizes the balance among these three aspects: economic, environmental, and social. The last concept is spirituality and development. Human beings are made up of mix of material and non-material elements, with the main aspect of human nature being an immortal being and learns and grows through spiritual disciplines. Having the sense of spirituality in one hand and human development perspective on the other hand can provide a better understanding on how development programs can be enhanced in a deeper and broader views. Social development look into a multidimensional aspect of individual and society. We cannot deal in just one dimension to say that we are giving towards development. It is my understanding that there are different facets of development and we should use different lenses such as these theories and constructs presented to have a better understanding on it. The concept of uneven and combined development allows us to address a fundamental question that is often overlooked.
Development for whom?